thank you for giving up your late afternoon part of your evening. For those of you that I haven't met, my name is Kim Guerin. I'm the superintendent of the school district, and you are here to help us make a critically important decision for Madison Simis. So I want to give you a brief history of what we've done so far to bring the candidates forward that you're going to see tonight, and how we're going to ask for your input. So it was an extremely rigorous process for our finalists to get before you tonight. We only bring finalists to you that we absolutely think would be an outstanding Madison School District principal. So tonight is about fit. You know your school best, you know your students best, families and staff, and frankly this International Baccalaureate program and Madison Simis has such a stellar reputation, and what you've built has taken years of work and partnership. And so we want to honor that by making sure, though your principal is irreplaceable, we need to think toward the future. And I do want to apologize for stealing Miss Webb to be the next Director of Curriculum and Instruction, but can you blame us? You really can, right? I mean, she's that great. So we started, I think we ended up with about 70 applicants for principal position, which is quite a lot. Dr. Lomeli, Ms. Marshall, and I did paper screening first. Then we sent out written assessments that are timed, so we can see applicants' writing style and have them answer some philosophical questions in a very pressure time format. And then from there, we scaled it down to some candidates that we wanted to interview in person, and they interviewed at the cabinet level. Once we interviewed them at the cabinet level, we do some reference checking, and we all know someone in the community, so we did some thorough reference checking. And then we picked the finalists that we thought would be the best fit for Simis. And today, the finalists interviewed with a school interview committee. And I'm sure some of your colleagues, if you weren't there yourself, some parents and some district office staff were a part of that formal interview process. But we want everyone to be able to interact with the candidates. So we have two finalists for you tonight. One you know very well, your current assistant principal, and one is a current principal from the Peoria School District. So I want you to think about fit. I want you to think about your program, your kids, your students, your needs, and your future. And we're really excited to ask your questions. I want to thank Mr. George in advance for the outstanding job I know he's going to do facilitating this process. And he will explain how those of you at home and those of you in person can give us feedback. And all feedback from tonight, feedback from the interview committee today, and all pieces of the process will weigh in our decision. We are going to be making a recommendation to our governing board on Tuesday night, so it is a quick turnaround at this point. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Mr. George, and again, thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you. I'm going to test out this microphone as well, because I'll be asking questions from here, and our candidates will be holding the microphone. So you had a little handout, and actually, do I need the microphone? Oh, I do, because of the stream. So I am going to be stuck here. Okay, they're streaming as well. On your handout, there is a little QR code, and you can just use your own personal device and give your feedback on both the candidates. Just make sure you do so by midnight tonight. After midnight, it closes off, so make sure you give your feedback by midnight tonight. Okay, if you're at home or streaming this, there's a little link at the bottom of the video. Just click on that little link, and then you can provide your feedback on the two candidates as well. Okay, and questions, looks like I have some here. So I will organize them. I may not ask exactly how you wrote them, and I also might combine them if they're very similar type questions. So as I go through those, I will try to ask all the questions that are given to me. And I believe that's it. So are we ready for, okay. So I'd like to introduce Miss Lindsay Murray as our first candidate. Microphone just so that the people online can hear you well. So we have have some community questions here for you. And what we're going to do is give you the first, there you go. We're going to give you the first 2 to 3 minutes just to introduce yourself.
All right, well, welcome. Thank you so much for being here, either in person or watching virtually. Lindsay Murray. I am a Chicago native, born in Canada, brought to Arizona for education. I went to school at NAU and got my bachelor's in English education and Spanish education. And then when I moved down to Phoenix, taught 7th and 8th grade language arts for a few years, got really passionate about teaching reading skills to students and gained some additional professional development in how to teach that, because I learned in my middle school program, we weren't learning how to teach students how to read. So I really gained some additional insight in some reading specialist skills and taught intervention students for a while, and then also taught students in the gifted and talented program in advanced learners. Following that, we became a IB pilot school for the middle years program. I had the opportunity to be a MYP teacher for many years, and then moved into an MYP coordinator role. And in that role was able to help facilitate the authorization process for that school successfully to be an MYP or a middle years program school. That's what Meadows feeds, we feed into there. Our school was reconstituted, and I had the opportunity to be selected as a master teacher, which is an instructional coach, teacher mentor, providing professional development, coaching, and mentoring with evaluations for teachers. It required a lot of professional development, and I was certified with the National Institute for Excellence in Teaching through that program. When the program dismantled due to the grant ending, I transitioned over to Madison, and it's been a really wonderful transition. That was 8 years ago. I started in the district office as the data analyst, supporting our teachers with their work in professional learning communities, in developing common assessments for math and for reading, for writing, and then also working with the curriculum instruction department to develop curriculum maps for reading and math with our new adoptions. In that role, I also had the opportunity to serve as the co-chair for the Arizona Assessment Collaborative, working with districts across Arizona to ensure we were implementing effective practices in our districts. When the opportunity came to come to Madison Simis as an assistant principal, I eagerly jumped on it because I am so passionate about an IB education for our students. I've been here for 4 years. I've received 2 separate trainings on heads of schools, IB, professional development, and we recently this year had our evaluation visit where we received a lot of positive feedback about our IB program. It's something I'm very passionate about and eager to share more of that knowledge with you all. Personally, I have 2 young children. One of them is in preschool at Simis here, and the other is 2. She's a hoot. But I think it's really important to have that balanced life where you can value your family, spend time at school, and really appreciate the work that we do for our students.
Thank you. Our first question, describe your leadership style.
When I think of my leadership style, I think it's important to have a clear vision, have a really clear understanding of what it is you want to accomplish for the school, how we can partner with all of our stakeholders to accomplish that. And in Madison Simis, there are a variety of stakeholders that are actively involved. Our community is eager to participate in their students' learning, whether that's teachers, social workers, classified staff, parents, neighbors, in the district office. We have a variety of different interests, but we all work together for student achievement and for student success, academically, socially, emotionally, and behaviorally. What I view my role as is having that clear vision, providing people with the skills and the resources that they need, and getting out of the way, making sure that we have systems in place, we have quality allocation of our resources that is purposeful and going to achieve, maximize our instructional opportunities with students, and then support teachers and support these different stakeholder groups so that they can achieve that work with students in the classroom or at home or in our community.
Thank you. This second question is along those same lines, so feel free to repeat yourself or highlight it as well. In what ways do you empower teachers to be leaders and role models for students?
I think one of the ways that you empower teachers is by making sure that they feel confident and have a sense of self-efficacy and teacher self-efficacy in the classroom, working with their students, working with the community. What I view as my role in that is making sure that we have a clear vision, as I mentioned, and then when we look at our data and we identify clear goals and outcomes that we have for our students, that we're then planning appropriately with professional development, with coaching opportunities, and with other resources that we may need to bring in so that we can then implement successfully. Something that we've done that I found really effective is providing opportunities for teachers to watch each other teach. So providing release time for teachers to go and visit their colleagues in their classrooms and learn new skills. And not only are they taking something away, but they're also getting an opportunity to share positive feedback with someone about what they're doing. So when we want to empower teachers, having them feel like they are proud of the work that they do, and then that they are partners in that work with their colleagues, collectively as a whole school community, and that they feel supported in the work they do. And so when there are opportunities where there might be conflict or disagreement, we come together and we decide what is it that is most important, ultimately, students first, and how are we going to address that need together? And if we empower each other to help make those decisions and problem solve, I think we're all equally going to be putting forth that effort to help achieve our goals.
Thank you. We're going to stay with the teacher theme. So in this challenging environment, in this very challenging environment, this comes from a parent specifically, what do you do specifically to obtain and retain the best teachers?
We are so fortunate at Simis. I hope our community knows how fortunate we are that our staff does not turn over. They want to be here. And so evaluating that system and reflecting on why our staff does not turn over is so key. Figuring out what it is about the culture in the community that is serving the students and the teachers that they want to be a part of this community is not only my job, it's my responsibility. We need to make sure that we are retaining our staff and that not just our teachers, but our classified staff feel valued and feel welcome. We have some very, very challenging days that we go through, and we are supported by an amazing parent group with PATS. We're supported by an amazing governing board in this district. But finding ways to make sure that we are, again, celebrating successes, that we're identifying where those needs are and how we can provide resources to address those needs, and then making sure that I have the integrity to follow through with that and to provide them with the resources and the coaching, and then to be available to jump in where needed. A great example of that is we have yet to hire one of our crossing guard positions, and we have been flexible in terms of our staffing and putting people out there. I'm out there sometimes doing the crossing guard when our cashier's not showing up. I'm jumping in to do that because we all have to lend a hand. We are working in the school together, and when they see the school leader participating in roles that we are expecting everyone else to collaborate in, I think there's a sense of responsibility and community. And I think that we are so supported by our parent community in that as well, that they want to make sure that we feel valued. And it's so critical to make sure we're partnering with that parent community to make sure that they know that their role is so integral in what we do at school. And when our parents are supporting our teachers, I think that helps them be empowered to want to stay at school as well.
Thank you. What has been a significant challenge for you in your current role?
We have had COVID recently, friends. I think the biggest challenge that we've had is at Simis, our students are changing. And I think we're seeing this everywhere in Arizona, but at this school, we've had to gain more skills and build our toolbox. And when you go to implement change somewhere, it can be difficult because there's an inherent desire to hold on to what you've done for a while and to make sure that you aren't letting go of things for the wrong reasons. So the biggest challenge, I think, is when we came back from COVID and we're back in person, we had 120 students that we identified right off the bat that were in severe need of academic support. Those students needed additional tier 2, tier 3 intervention, which is more intensified, specific instructions being delivered to them. And we had to develop a system to do that, and we did develop that system. I think it's important that we took the time to evaluate what the need was, to identify a resource to support that need, and then to provide teachers with the rationale for why this was happening, and parents with the communication for how we are going to support your student in catching up. And I'm proud to say that after that year last year, we decreased that number of students in that year down to about 19 students that we were very concerned about. And this year, throughout the year again, we've seen a decrease in students that are coming in below grade level in terms of reading ability by about 50%. So I'm really proud of the work that we've done, but it takes a lot of dedication to looking at data, looking at resource allocation, looking at student needs and communication across all of our stakeholder groups so that we're being purposeful in our time in our energy and maximizing our opportunities when we are in the classroom with students. But the challenge itself is just figuring out how do we narrow that down and make it manageable? How do we do that in a way where we're not burning out teachers and where we're not making parents feel overwhelmed just like we are with the process when we're sharing information about their students and their academic needs, because that can be hard to hear. And we do that by having, again, a clear purpose, a clear vision, and an action plan that we're going to implement and then celebrate success as we go through. And if we need to reflect and change, then we reflect and change along the way too.
Thank you for that. Since we are a pre-K4 campus, how will you work to include our preschool in our campus culture, both students and staff?
I love having preschool here. It's so fun. And especially, not just because my child has gone through the program here, but I think that incorporating preschool into this community is important for a few reasons. One, these students roll up into the Madison Simis School. They are Simis community members. Their parents participate on PATS. They are a part of the school. So we have to make sure we are including these families. We have to make sure we're considering community education in our planning and making sure that they feel welcome and valued. One of the ways that we do that is by supporting them with instruction in social emotional skills like we do in the kindergarten through 4th grade. They're also working through the ruler program, and they're also embedding some of those skills in their day-to-day lessons. Integrating them when we have spirit weeks and making sure that they're aware of what those spirit weeks are. It sounds simple, but making sure that they have the opportunity to dress up in pajama day if everyone else is dressing in pajamas. Making sure that their teachers and their staff members are included when we do staff appreciation. And Pats does an amazing job of doing that, but making sure there's that communication between the site leader at Simis and the MAC and community ed leaders is really key. And if we're not having that constant communication and discussing what's working well and how can we refine that practice, then we're not open to feedback about what we can do to strengthen that development. So I think making sure we're having opportunities to bring them into the classroom, having opportunities into the school community, pardon me, and making sure that they feel like they are as valued of a member as they are, because those students are Simis students.
Thank you. Our next question. Simis has a vibrant and passionate parent community. How have you partnered with your past parent communities, and how do you plan to engage the Simis parent community if you become principal?
So I think a lot of the work when it comes to working with parent communities is being open to listening to feedback, being open to hearing what the needs are of that community, making sure that we are listening and we are coming to a common agreement in terms of what we are here to accomplish. And at Simis, that's a high standard for academic, social, and emotional achievement for our students. How I've worked with PATS and at this specific school is making sure that I'm in communication with the presidents and with the different departments and sharing what's happening with the programs that I support at school. So in this role that I'm in now, I support our PBIS, our behavior system, and work with PATS in terms of what that looks like and how they can support us there. And asking for their input, asking for different ways that we can grow and different ways that we can enhance what we're doing at school to support them at home and support our students. Finding opportunities to partner together and see where we can collaboratively work on the same objectives. We all want our students to be successful, so how can I, in my role, provide that connection and provide that opportunity to come into the school? In communicating with parents, I think that it's important to pick up the phone and have a phone call. I know that in today's day and age, not everybody enjoys picking up the phone, and it's easier to have a text message or an email, but having that face-to-face or that over-the-phone conversation can be so crucial to really diving in and seeking to understand and seeking to connect, and hopefully coming up with some common agreement as to how can we work together to have a win-win scenario in whatever it is that we're trying to accomplish for students. So I think making sure that we're open to communication, we're providing opportunities for feedback, providing opportunities to listen, and being present. So just being a present force at school and making sure that I'm willing to do, again, the things that I've done at Simis, participating in duties at drop-off, participating in the campus cafeteria or at a crosswalk, and if I'm visible, I think that also helps a lot in the parent community feeling like I'm willing to support.
Super, thank you. How do you achieve a balance between state requirements and components of an IB education in order to have a successful program?
One of the things that I like about IB is that as a program, they do a really nice job of understanding national, state, and local guidelines and making sure that we are adhering to the local guidelines, local, state, and national guidelines prior to doing the IB program. So we have state standards we need to teach. We have adopted curriculum from the district. We have expectations and mandates that we have to implement. When we have that as our base framework of what we need to deliver to students, then we can layer on the context by which we teach. And I think that's what IB does, is it gives us a framework to integrate opportunities for students to think critically, for students to take action on their learning, and to collaborate with one another to become prepared for a global world that they live in. So we want our students to be able to make connections to learning in the classroom, out of the classroom. That's what IB does for us. It takes our state standard we're teaching and makes it actionable, makes it something that is then tangible. So a great example of that is when students are learning about how they organize themselves, which is one of the IB concepts. And they think about different organizational systems in their life, and they might go home and think, hey, mom and dad, we don't have an organizational system for bedtime. Let's come up with a checklist to get us ready for bedtime. And it's something that's showing that they're taking their learning from school out of the classroom. So providing those opportunities to think about IB as a framework and as a method and a philosophy for teaching is really important. To do that, we need to make sure that we're having actionable professional development throughout the year built in, having PLC time that is dedicated to reflecting on our IB practices and integrating it into our standards that we're implementing, and then making sure that we are following up on that implementation with the support of our IB coordinator. She does a wonderful job going and providing some support to teachers during their planning sessions, but also in modeling lessons. So having opportunities for teachers to get that additional professional development on the fly as well. And then making sure we're communicating with parents why we're doing all of this. So why is IB valuable? How is that impacting their students? How is coming to an IB school going to prepare you for life? Because what an IB school does is it helps create the IB learner profile of being an inquirer, a caring communicator, and all of the 10 attributes so that they can then have a foundation to go into whatever academic career they might in their future, prepared to learn in whatever way they need to.
And along those same lines with IB, specifically, what do you see as the biggest challenge of an IB elementary school?
I think the biggest challenge is there's a lot of concepts within IB that are specific language, specific vocabulary that are tied to IB. And so, for example, they have what are called approaches to learning skills. And when we think about approaches to learning skills, it ties to the district's strategic plan for transdisciplinary learning skills and having opportunities for students to think critically, but it's labeled something separately. So it's finding out what those explicit labels are in the IB program, and then identifying in our practice, where do we already do that? How can we celebrate the things that we're already implementing well? And then where are we not implementing those things? Because maybe we didn't know that specific vocabulary to understand that when we are talking about taking action, it means having students take learning out of the classroom. When we are talking about student agency, we're talking about students having voice, choice, and ownership in the classroom. So it's not necessarily a challenge with IB as much as it's vocabulary that we have to make sure we're providing professional development on, and we're communicating what that explicit vocabulary is to students, to parents, and to teachers, so that they can understand what students are learning in the classroom and the value of why that is important to learn that specific vocabulary.
Thank you. You mentioned the strategic plan. In the strategic plan, it talks about social and emotional wellness. What specific metrics would you use to measure whether or not your school is having a positive effect on students with their social and emotional wellness?
So some specific metrics that we have available to us are looking at our PBIS data, so the discipline data that we have. Looking at what our referral rates are, looking at how many teacher-managed situations there are, how many student-managed, teacher-managed or office-managed situations exist, and hopefully we're seeing a decline in those. And if not, narrowing down where are the target areas where we might be seeing some challenges, and then how can we devote resources to those areas to try and address them. So an example for that is we noticed different grade levels having different areas of need in the last few months, and so each grade will have a targeted booster that they were really trying to support with specific areas to reinforce positive behavior. So for example, kindergarten, following expectations on the playground and making sure that they were being responsible on the playground. So they retaught that expectation, and then we saw a decrease in discipline referrals for playground misbehavior. Outside of the behavior data, we also have DESA, which is a really great tool for teachers to reflect on students in their classroom and reflect on different competencies and see where they might have a certain need or might require some additional support from a social worker. When we look at DESA, we can see how are we decreasing the amount of students that have needs where they might require a tier 2 group with a social worker. And then furthermore, we have our parent surveys. When we get parent surveys, one of the biggest things I like to look at is, do parents think their students are safe at school? Do parents think their students are happy at school? We know that it's important for students to learn. We know that it's important for students to be safe, but also, are they happy? And is that perception that students are happy? Because if we're sending students to school and they're not happy, then foundationally they're not going to engage in learning. So we need to make sure we are addressing that social emotional component for them. And I think we can do that. I'm sure there's going to be a question about that. Okay. But we have a variety of resources to do that. But looking at the data from parent surveys and seeing if we're seeing a decrease in amount of parents that are concerned about student safety, or a decrease in the amount of parents that are concerned about the happiness of their children, and we want students to feel welcome. So looking at PBIS data, DESA data, parent surveys, and then there's other metrics as well that are more qualitative and in conversations that we have with students, how apt are students to be able to problem solve, how apt are students to take redirection. And so there's other qualitative things that we can collect also.
Thank you. The next question, how would you deal with a conflict between a parent and a teacher who both feel that they're in an impasse?
Great question. Conflict exists. And so I think the key in conflict is seeking to understand. And when you look at both parties and you seek for information and you try to understand what the foundational concern of both parties are, then we can hopefully see what the root cause is of this concern. And we can try and address where are some things where we have common understandings and common agreements where we can work together to have a positive outcome. When it comes to the school's priorities, there are certain expectations that we have to put in place. There are district guidelines, there are board policies. And so if there's disagreements about those, that's a different kind of conversation. But if it's a philosophy of teaching, if it's an approach to interactions with students, I think sitting people down together, having conversations to understand what the problem is, and then trying to action plan and solve the problem is key. I've served as a mediator between parents and teachers before. I've also encouraged parents to go and take their concern to the teacher. Oftentimes I find that parents come directly to administration with a concern, and they haven't yet voiced it with a teacher. Oftentimes when it's voiced, the concern gets addressed because it was a misunderstanding. So I think those would be some of my recommendations, would be to first address the problem and see if we can try and resolve it individually, and then provide additional support to have a common understanding and agreement about what we can do mutually to address the needs of our students and of our school.
Thank you. What is your greatest strength, and what would be an area you are working on improving with your administrative skills?
I'm going to start with my area of improvement. I am working to learn to delegate. I especially during the past few years have tried to take things off of the plate of people. I think that in terms of wanting to retain staff, taking things off of the plates of teachers has been my default. Trying to remove barriers for staff and take things on so that they don't feel that burden as much as possible. That's an area I need to grow in, because I do know that we all have a responsibility to our students. And so pushing back a little bit and helping teachers grow their leadership skills as well, and provide some of those opportunities back to teachers. That's an area that I'm trying to work on, is that delegation of responsibility. In terms of strength, I think that I am a very principled person who has a clear picture of what it is that I would like to accomplish, which is make sure that students feel safe, happy, and welcome at school, and that they are able to learn because they feel safe, happy, and welcome at school. And when I approach things from that lens, I think that I have an ability to communicate with whatever stakeholder group I tend to communicate with, to have a common understanding that we are here for the same purpose. We are all here to work to support our students. And in seeking to understand and in seeking to partner with our community, whether that's parents, it's teachers, it's students, I think that I have an ability to be empathetic and to listen to the concerns of that group and try to be action-oriented and try and find a solution.
All right, thank you. And on behalf of the district, I'd like to thank you for applying for this position. We greatly appreciate you. We're going to give you the last 2 to 3 minutes for a closing.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here again. This has been an absolute pleasure. Coming to Simis 4 years ago just really changed my life. Oh my goodness. I work with some of the most amazing educators every day. Everyone shows up here eager to learn, eager to work. We are all lifelong learners. Being a part of this community is something that I am so proud of. I am very, very fortunate to have this opportunity to be in front of you tonight. I am hopeful that I have the opportunity to serve Simis as the next school leader. My goal is to make sure that our students are taken care of and that we work as partners with you all. Every person that comes to Simis is a Simis stakeholder, and I want to make sure that you feel that way, that you feel valued, and that you feel welcome. And if I can do that in the role I'm in currently or the next role, it would still be an honor. So thank you very much for your time, and have a nice night.
Thank you, Ms. Mary. We're just waiting for our second candidate. There you are, it's looking the other way. Mr. Curtis Smith, so our next candidate, Mr. Curtis Smith, thank you very much for being here. I'm gonna go ahead and hand you this microphone. You need to make sure you use it, even though they can probably hear you, need to make sure you need to use the microphone so people online can see you right over there.
So no clip-on mic?
No clip-on mic. So you get to hold it there.
Thank you.
So please use the mic so our online people can hear you as well. We have some questions here from the community and some teachers that we'd like to ask you. Okay, and we'll start with the first one. Can you describe your leadership style?
It's interesting when you think about all of my career in education, and this is my 32nd year. And as I shared with folks through the interview today, one of the things I think about is I get to be a principal. So many people every day get up and they have to do something. They have to do a job to live their life. And for me, I get to get up every day and I get to be a principal. I get to work with teachers, I get to work with kids, I get to work with parents, and that's an amazing place to start. Can you please repeat the question?
Describe your leadership style.
Perfect. And I think when you start with that, the idea that you have a leader who is passionate and committed to helping kids grow and learn, that kind of permeates the culture. So as a principal, I start with, I know there are people who probably have watched the TV show, The Doctor Hospital, where he goes around and it's always, how can I help? And I believe that's where it starts. You know, as a leader, how can I help? And that starts with making sure I understand my community, making sure I understand my teachers, understand my staff, understand my students, and how can I help? Because if we've done a really good job around our mission and vision and our values, and then we know what our true north is, and my job is to ensure that we get there. So it really starts as that servant leadership, building those relationships, and then making sure that all the steps we take along the way are aligned to our overall true north. What is our mission? And when things get tough, we have to revisit that and recalibrate that. And so I think those are really key. As another human being, as I kind of go through this and talk to you, I can probably see me do little boxes. I'm really strategic. You know, I really think through, this is where we are, and really assess where we are with multiple voices, and then work collectively to determine what are our next steps, and how much of a chunk is big enough to get us to where we need to go, and also small enough that we can measure it to make sure that we are still headed in the right direction. So relationship-based, servant-focused, strategic, really focused on ensuring that our students achieve the outcomes that we've set for them. And when you're looking at an IB school and looking at those attributes around the student learning profile, what an amazing human being we're creating by working together.
Thank you for that. I skipped a step, so you get to take the next 2 to 3 minutes to introduce yourself.
Okay. I'm Curtis Smith. Family and friends call me CJ. I've been in education for 32 years. I started as a 3rd grade teacher, and I happened to have, my next opportunity was to move into a brand new school that was opening that was working in partnership with a local university, and this was in Washington State, so it was Washington State University actually had an office on our campus, and we engaged in action research in a Howard Gardner multiple intelligence, multi-age school. So we were kind of bursting the walls open, trying something new. And so what an amazing opportunity to look at how do you take a framework, in this case it was multiple intelligences, here we look really at IB, and you look at how do you integrate that across your curriculum and make connections for kids. Because at the end of the day, it's always about how do we help kids own their learning, make meaning, and be able to do something with their learning. So that was my teaching career, so I had 10 years in the classroom, and in that setting I also taught for 4 of them at Gen Ed, and then I moved into Gifted Ed, which actually is really interesting because you look at these little learners, and I would get phone calls from moms and dads every year saying, you know, you're a magnet program, you're across the district, is this the right place for my student? And my response back was, if your home school has other kids who that interact and see the world the same way as they are, keep them there. Otherwise, bring them to us because this will be an amazing place for them to find peers that think like them and see the world like them. And so, kind of making that connection back to IB, most of my students, we didn't have a primary years program. We'd go from our school to the middle school, the middle years program, and then off to the high school at the IB. And so it's been fun watching my students who I had as littles track through, and now they're in their mid-20s or late 20s, and what they aspire to in the world, and see that whole learner profile actually become, you know, out there as these adults in the community. So after that, I taught for 10 years. I was a new teacher mentor for 1 year, and then I've been an administrator since. And so when you're looking at that, I've been a school principal now for 20 years. So I was in a Title I school, K-5, during the time period when No Child Left Behind came out, and we had the opportunity to apply for a Reading First grant, so I got to lead the whole initiative of Reading First implementation and take our kiddos from struggling readers to becoming incredibly strong readers and writers. And in year 3, we were celebrated by the state of Washington and the growth that we had on the state test based on the work we were doing. Then I transitioned from that school to the highest performing school in the district. That was a middle school, 6, 7, 8, completely different parent community, completely different student population. And one thing that was interesting going in is how do you continue to create a compelling purpose or compelling need in a school that's already performing high? And so that was part of our work, is how do I work with my school to honor where we are and still recognize that we're still on a journey? Because if you're looking at proficiency rate, at what level are you okay with saying, well, these kids aren't proficient, and that's okay? And that was a really tough conversation we had to have, but we did engage in it. And over time, we looked at our math performance, and we started looking at comparator schools and seeing what schools were outperforming us. Let's go to those schools and see what they're doing. And then how can we take that back to our school and implement that? And I was in that setting for 7 years. By my 7th year, we had 5 sections of algebra on our campus. So our kids were already advanced learners headed off to high school. And we accomplished that really by looking at and putting in place a math block, which none of the other middle schools had. Then I came to Arizona, and I was hired into a school that it started with culture. The school, it was kind of floundering in that area, and so we looked at with our community and with our staff and with our students, how do we go about creating a culture, a community where we all believe that we can be successful and that we're in this together. And then from the academic side, we right away jumped on and tackled primary reading, because if our little ones can't read, we kind of close doors on them. And then my most current setting, I am in a K-8 STEAM school that transitioned from being a school within a school prior to me getting there to STEAM is good for all. So how do you go about reinventing and creating a school where across our campus, it's absolutely known why we're here. And we're there because of our STEAM focus. And the STEAM focus's purpose is to ensure that our kids are actually seeing the why of their learning and be able to apply it. So that's been my 20-year journey as a principal, landing to stand right in front of you, talking about the private years program that you have here at the school and looking at possibly leading your school to the next steps.
Thank you. In what ways do you empower teachers to be leaders and role models for students?
When you're looking at the leadership component, I believe every single teacher is a leader. And it's been interesting because when I go back to my journey, I never intended on leaving the classroom. I loved being a teacher. And I was in my master's program, and as I was working on my master's degree, I was reading all this research on how a good leader can empower and elevate the teaching profession. And you look at teachers as professionals and the knowledge and expertise they bring to the table, that's kind of where it starts, just believing that these folks are the leaders on our campus. You know, from there, of course, you have your professional learning communities, because that is what really creates the work. You know, teams coming together and talking about what is it we want all kids to know, how are we going to best engage kids in that, and what is our data showing us and how do we respond to that. Looking at school leadership teams, and really diving in and looking at feedback from our community, feedback from our parents, feedback from our kids, as well as academic data and other data sources to say, this is where we are, where do we go next? And so when you're looking at teachers as leaders, then first of all, they're leaders in the classroom to start out with, and then looking at within their collaborative community, they're leaders, and then also at that district, at the school level, when you're looking at your school leadership team. But I have tremendous faith in human beings that choose to go into the profession of teaching, and I believe that every one of them brings to the table a desire to do best for kids.
Thank you. Speaking of teachers, in this challenging environment for teachers, what do you do specifically to obtain and retain the best teachers?
Well, I have to say, just like with anyone else, it's going to come down to the relationship. We have to connect with human beings on a human level. And so being present, making those connections not only as professionals, but as human beings, and then as we're doing the work together. So we're looking at our collective plan from our mission to our true outcomes. You know, you're rolling in my sleeves and getting there with them. Because when you're looking at teachers are looking for, does my school leader care about me? Does my school leader know me? Does the school leader value me? Does my school leader support me? And I think you just have to get in there and do the work alongside them.
Thank you. What has been a significant challenge for you in your current role?
Well, we just came out of COVID. Test results are still coming out. And I think that, quite frankly, is one of our biggest pieces as a STEAM school that I'm in right now leading. And I'm assuming this is what we're seeing everywhere. Data is showing that we're going to have a much quicker recovery in reading than we are seeing in math. And when you're looking at the impact of that on our students, some of these kiddos, your third grade students, 2 years ago, they were our littlest, and now they're taking the state test. Last year, our fifth graders going into the year are going to the state test. Fractions were going to be something they're going to struggle with, because in third grade, when you introduce fractions, they didn't get that same experience. And that resulted in sort of an all hands on deck approach. And I was the fraction boot camp guy. I was in my fifth grade classroom, and we were doing anchor charts, and I was in Stentors doing it with my teachers, because we had to figure out a way to do better. And so that's probably our biggest challenge right now, is really about how do we deal with the COVID recovery. And really that takes a significant effort on the parent side, the student side, and the teaching side. So parent, student, and teacher, yes, thank you. But that's definitely our biggest struggle right now.
Thank you. Since we are a pre-K4 campus, how will you work to include our preschool in our campus culture, both students and staff?
I love having preschool on campus. One of the things when you're looking at just those littles, they're just so happy, and they bring joy, and they bring their dirty little fingers, and they're just awesome little kids. And so when you're looking at that connection and looking at the whole primary years program and the framework and thinking about those transdisciplinary themes, you know, those are things that all of our students, our littlest, are asking the same questions. And so I would look at, you know, what are the themes across your campus and how can we connect those back into our preschool program? Looking at celebrations. Our preschoolers need to be part of our celebrations too. Our actual school traditions. So we're looking at things like spirit days or field days. Our preschoolers need to be part of that. And that's from the student side. But from the staff side, certainly looking at those opportunities where we're crossing over from professional development and the leadership team, and our school events. How do we ensure that our 3-year-olds, do we go lower than 3 in our preschool in this district? So 3-year-olds all the way through to our 4th graders are all part of the same community. And at the end of the day, I would hope by connecting with them from that relationship side, our preschoolers would know who Mr. Smith is, who's their principal, so that when they come from our preschool as 3 and they enter our kindergarten program, they already know they're part of the community.
Thank you. Simis has a vibrant and passionate parent community. How have you partnered with your past parent communities, and how do you plan to engage the Simis parent community if you become principal?
Well, I heard about that today, by the way. During my final interview today, one of the questions I asked at the end, there was a couple parents represented, as well as teachers on the group, was to our parent group. Why do you choose here? And was really interested because both of them started with, because we have an amazing parent group that's committed to helping our kids be successful. And when I asked the same question of our teachers, given the fact that right now we are in a teacher shortage, why do they stay here? It sounds like there's significant longevity at this campus too with our teachers. And they said it starts with our parent community. They support us, they care about the kids, they are here for the school overall success. So when you think about the engagement piece with that, first of all, it starts with relationships. I need to be present. I need to be in the parking lots, and by the way, I still want to figure out how your parking lot works. But I need to be in the parking lots. I need to be at dismissal from our before and after school program. I need to make those connections with our parent group. From there, you're looking at opportunities to engage parents in a way that is very meaningful. And so whether or not that is surveying parents for needs, bringing parents onto our site council and our leadership teams, and working side by side with our parents to ensure that wherever our mission, visions, and our plan is going to take us, our parents are absolutely on board with us because we're traveling this journey together. I think another huge piece when you're looking at parents is celebrations. I know when you're looking at the Prime Years program, there's those exhibitions or demonstrations of learning. How do we bring parents on campus to celebrate our kids? Because, boy, I've really enjoyed within my current setting that we do demonstrations of learning at least twice a year, and we invite our parents to come see the work, and students are so proud of showing their connections between content and their actual demonstrations of learning. How do they apply it? And parents are so proud of their littles as their children are explaining to them those connections. So I think part of it is that planning, part of it is building. So it starts with building a relationship, then looking at that collaborative planning, working side by side, and then celebrating the successes.
Super. How do you achieve a balance between state requirements and components of an IB education in order to have a successful program?
Well, I think one thing that stood out to me when I was going through, and by the way, I'm going to back up and share something else with you. One of my students years ago, her father was the head of global professional development for IB for about 14, 15 years. And so immediately when Simis was in school as a finalist for, I reached out to Doug and said, hey Doug, I'm going to be standing in front of these parents. I'm going to be interviewing for this position. What is your guidance? And Doug said, well, first of all, do not believe that just because you've had 32 years in education, most of it in early childhood, and all 20 years as a principal, that's going to be enough. You need to really understand or begin to understand what IB is and how the learner profile fits. And so I dove into the implementation manual for IB. I looked at the appendix for the IB program. I've got a couple other resources around what does professional learning communities look like in an IB setting. So I think that's important. So when you're looking at all of those pieces, and then one of the things that stood out to me is when you're looking at that balance between standards of the state and IB, part of it was looking at what skills, concepts, and knowledge do kids need. And that can be discrete, but then how do you quickly move that over so most of the time is really on that inquiry time and actually that application of learning. And so certainly there's a balance, enough knowledge, skills, and concept development so that I can do something with it. And so that's how I think I really work with teachers to balance that. But the other thing is, this school is well established. Teachers in this school have been doing that for years, and so there'll be certainly things that I would be learning as I come into the position, but there's things that I also would bring to the table and how do we continue to refine that.
with your research of IB and such, specifically, what do you see as the biggest challenge of an IB elementary school?
Probably the question you just asked, to be honest. No, I don't think, I looked at it, and the more I read, the more excited I got around how, so when you look at the, let's see what we're looking at here. So when you're looking at those transdisciplinary skills or transdisciplinary themes, it took me back to that little who always was asking why. And so how do we continue to have kids deeply engage in inquiry around their learning? And so I think that's probably that weird balance because of the age, is when you're really diving into true inquiry, it's very student driven. But then how do you structure it enough so the littles are successful and over time do that gradual release so that they actually are able to take that on themselves? I'm guessing there are masters on the staff that I can learn from, but I think that probably would be one of the challenges. So balancing the standards with the IB work and then looking at how do you structure inquiry for success so that it really moves towards what true inquiry is, which is driven by the student.
Thank you. Social emotional wellness is part of the district's strategic plan. What specific metrics would you use to measure whether or not your school is having a positive effect on students with their social and emotional wellness?
Social emotional learning is probably one of the primary reasons I'm standing in front of you. I have been in my current system for 9 years, and when I was really wrestling a little bit around what's happening with social emotional learning and why is this even becoming a political conversation. One of my colleagues said, hey, have you ever looked at Madison? And I came onto your campus and I've looked at websites and the whole child is present. The idea that we have to grow kids academically, socially, and emotionally. And so that is huge to my heart because I believe that we're growing little human beings' knowledge and skills and helping them become competent mathematicians and scientists and readers, but we also are growing alongside their parents amazing human beings. And that's, I think, it is hugely important. And so when you're looking at social emotional learning and looking at metrics, some of them are not going to be quantifiable. It's going to be things that we're going to observe. Are students able to self-regulate better? When students do engage in conflict, are they able to resolve those conflicts in a way that's successful? Are they using communication skills that allow them to hear each other? Now, those are things that we can capture anecdotal data on. As far as quantifiable data, you're going to be looking at referrals, discipline, all of those numbers which would show a decrease. But I think you're looking that this would be the result of what you're observing through your anecdotal data.
Thank you. How would you deal with a conflict between a parent and a teacher who both feel that they're having an impact?
When you're in a situation like that, in my years in education, I can tell you that every parent that comes to the table believes that they're bringing to it the biggest concern for their child. They're the advocates for their kids. They love their kids no matter what. And so when you're working in a situation like that, part of it is really stepping back and listening and really hearing what the concerns are from the parents, and then making sure that I've done a good job of clarifying and paraphrasing, making sure I really have a good understanding of what the concern is. And then working alongside with the teacher about ensuring the teacher really understands and is hearing, because it's sometimes in the world of teaching, and by the way, as teachers, hearts are given. And so when you're looking at that, how do you professionalize it versus personalize it? Because sometimes if I feel in my heart that I'm wounded or I'm hurt, it's harder to hear what really the issue is. So making sure that a teacher understands how do we professionalize it, not personalize it, and hear that message. And ideally, we shoot for a win-win, and that's the goal always. But there are times where, quite frankly, and very rarely this is the case, but if a teacher is acting in a professional manner, has followed all regulations and policies, sometimes it's kind of that hard conversation with the adult on, let me help you understand where the teacher is coming from in the process and supporting the teacher, because teachers go into it. No teacher goes into it with the intent of upsetting a parent. we all go into it with ideal of growing and supporting kids, and we all want to work alongside our parents. So it can happen, and I believe more often than not it's a communication issue, and so being able to hear, paraphrase, and try to solve alongside the teacher, and recognizing that there might be a time where a teacher, quite frankly, has done exactly what they need to do and just doesn't feel right for the parents. And trying to really mitigate and support that. And hopefully, I've done a good job of investing in the relationship with the parent, that we're gonna still walk away feeling heard and valued and supported, and it's a win-win.
Thank you. What is your greatest strength, and what would be an area you are working on improving with your administrative skills?
I would say, if you're looking at greatest strengths, I'm really high relationship. I am very passionate about what I do. When I stood in front of you and said, I get to be a principal. All the facets of what we do, I love. I love the people side. I love the problem-solving side. I love the learning side. It's one of those things where, as an adult, I'm a lifelong learner. I know what I know, and I continue to grow. And so, when you're looking at strengths, that's what I really bring to the table. Is around relationships, connections, and really passionately focused on helping our teachers and our kids be more and more successful. From the growth side, this was an easy one coming into this type of setting. I need to learn IB. I need to learn the primary years program. Thank goodness there's some experts on this campus. I've been directed to some great resources and continue to grow my capacity as an educator. I know that anytime you move into a new setting, it's going to be about learning the new standards, learning the new content, learning the new, in this case, learning the new program.
Thank you. Please describe your approach to inclusive practices and your experience supporting students with IEPs.
When you're looking at students with disabilities, and I think it's one of those pieces where, and this is important from a language perspective, all students are general education students first, and so students that are serviced by special education, it's with special education services, or a student who's serviced by special education. It's not a special education kid. That doesn't feel right. And so we start with all kids are general education students first. And then you look at least restrictive environment. And in looking at the least restrictive environment, how do the accommodations within the IEP and the modifications that are built in that are going to help the student be successful in that setting play out? Because when you're looking at successful inclusion, it's a win-win. The student who has the learning disability is engaging in learning with typically developing peers, and so cognitively they're being kind of pushed to grow and think maybe beyond what they would in their a special education setting itself. And then from the other side, the general education side, you look at some of those things in the IB learner profile about you're looking at caring, about being open-minded, about being risk takers, about being very principled. But those are human things that help us connect to other people. And as you're looking at growing global citizens, all of these kiddos are part of our school environment. So I think it really starts with what does the LRE say, and how can we make sure that this student who's being included is truly included, and they're valued as part of that system, they're supported in that system, and we're working collectively to help them be successful.
Thank you. And we're going to give the last 2 to 3 minutes for you to have a conclusion.
All right, thank you. It's interesting because you look at a journey over my 32 years in education. I am passionate about what I do. The more I have learned about the primary years program and about Simis and its history as far as the success with students and its support from our community, I know that this would be a school that I would be a solid leader for, that will grow you and support you and ensure that this journey you're already on, because this is such an interesting and special place, because it's not like there is things that need to be initiated. We need to ensure that we're all on board, that we are continually growing and developing these kiddos that are really aligned with that learner profile. And so that's something I want you to know about, but I also want you to know that I'm really excited about the opportunity to join the greater Madison community. And when I began to look, and as I shared, that whole child is really the work we need to do. And the other thing I was amazed at is this system really has embraced signature programming. And so when you're looking at the signature programs, from my perspective, What it's about is how do you connect learning in a way that students make meaning with and then can apply to their world? Because ultimately, when we see purpose in our learning, then we're motivated to learn. And so from the Simis community itself, boy, just walking in the front door and interacting with the woman at the reception desk, to being walked through the building with the current principal, who is just, she's a strong advocate for this school and loves this school. And by the way, it's really cool that she's going to stay in the district, so whoever ends up in this role will continue to have that connection. And then sitting in the room today with staff from the school and parents from the school and hearing about the community itself. That's something that you all should be incredibly proud of, and I would be proud to be the leader of the school.
Thank you. I'm going to take the microphone, but stay there. I'm going to remind you how to give feedback, in addition of which, parents, community members, teachers, you'll have a chance, if you'd like, to come up and talk to both candidates in just a little bit here, okay? So, one moment. Go. So again, you have your pamphlet, you have the QR code. Just make sure you do so by midnight. Thank you. Sorry, I'm still a teacher. So the QR code you can use to give feedback. You have until midnight and give us feedback on both candidates. And then we're choosing our other candidate. And then actually right now you can feel free to come on up and pick your candidate. Thank you.
Mr. George, do you want to remind our online audience?
Yes, thank you. 2 mistakes I've made tonight. All right, so online audience as well, you can give feedback by clicking that little link at the bottom of the video. Okay, and then make sure you do so by midnight and just click that little link and you should be able to give feedback on both of our candidates.
Can we give Mr. George a round